While it wasn't the first TTRPG I played, Vampire the Masquerade was the game that got me hooked on the hobby. From the moment I opened the revised edition core book, I knew I would love this game, and over the past 2 decades, I've spent hundreds of hours in the world of darkness. Thus, the news that a new edition is in the making got me curious and excited. After creating a Demiplane account, I dove into the V6 Alpha Playtest, read through its contents, and... well, I have opinions. In this video, I want to share what gets me excited about V6, which rules totally do not vibe with me, and which changes have me going, this is interesting, but I have some questions. Before we dive into this, please be aware that all of these takes are based on the V6 Alpha playtest of July 2026. If you're watching this video in the future, there might have already been other playtests made available which I did not have access to at the time of this video. I also want to make something perfectly clear. This video covers my opinions about this playtest. These opinions are not gospel, and if you find yourself liking stuff that I don't like, that's great. There's enough space in the TTRPG hobby for people to enjoy different stuff, and I think there's a lot to like about this playtest. I've done my best to voice my opinions with respect, and I don't mind if anyone disagrees with me. If you do disagree with me, please do so respectfully. I would love to engage with people who watch this video, but let's come from a place of mutual respect and love for Vampire the Masquerade. Edition changes invoke a lot of feelings in people who love a game, and I do not want to question that love. What I do want to do is share my opinions, hear yours, and look forward to another chapter in the long history of this World of Darkness game. Thanks everybody for being mindful. Let's kick things off with the stuff I like. First, the changes to the core resolution mechanic. Just like in previous editions, V6 uses 10-sided dice, aka D10s. When the outcome of an action is uncertain, you assemble a dice pool. This is often the sum of your number of dots in an attribute plus your number of dots in a skill. So far, it's the same as in previous editions, but here's the big change. Before rolling, you subtract a number of dice from your pool equal to the difficulty of the roll. Then, you roll your remaining dice. If at least one of them is an 8 or higher, you succeed. Not a single 8? It's a failure, and if you have no successes and at least one 1 among your dice, it's a painful failure which comes with additional consequences. I love player-facing information when it comes to resolution mechanics, and the fact that difficulty translates to a reduced amount of dice in your pool immediately clues the players in on how hard the roll will be. The storyteller packet for the playtest also comes with a lot of info on how to gauge difficulty, which should make it easy for storytellers to assess how hard a roll should be. Another change I am much in favor of is the reduced amount of skills. I think Vampire always had skills that overlapped too much or weren't as impactful as others. For example, having both Brawl and Melee as separate skills felt superfluous to me, and Leadership being its own skill felt redundant when there are skills like Persuasion and the Charisma attribute. The V6 playtest boils the skill list down to 13 skills, compared to V5's 27 skills. Each skill also includes a number of foci. When you gain your first, third, and fifth dot in a skill, you pick one of its foci which grant you a bonus on relevant checks. For example, Expression has foci such as acting, music, and writing. While I think some skills should still be their own thing, I don't agree with Empathy and Insight becoming foci of the Awareness skill, I do support this skill cleanup and think the remaining skills cover basically everything a vampire in Modern Knights ends up doing. Except for driving, I guess, since that is no longer a skill. Oh well, it's an alpha, I guess. One final bit I do appreciate is that it seems like V6 will be continuing metaplot elements from V5. The Beckoning is mentioned in the playtest, and even though it is over, the elders who return seem different. Also, this iteration of the game seems to take modern technology into consideration. For example, younger kindred understand that in the age of generative AI, blatant masquerade breaches can be waved off as fakes, using this deceptive technology for their own schemes. It looks like the authors are open to build on what has been introduced narratively in V5, while also moving the plot and world forward. That's a good sign in my opinion, and I'm curious to see what else awaits us in the story of this edition. Now, with the good stuff out of the way, let's dive into the things I don't like. First of all, we're saying goodbye to hunger dice. V5's hunger mechanic has been my favorite mechanical change to the game in the entire history of Vampire the Masquerade. While I understand the critics and their dislike, to me, hunger has been the best mechanical representation of how the beast's urges influence a vampire this game has ever had. It's elegant, and seeing how more and more of your dice are replaced with hunger dice visualizes the ever-growing influence of that dark passenger. Hunger was also something you as a player couldn't manage. If it got too high, you had to hunt. In doing so, however, you were giving in to the dark sides of being a vampire, and thus the mechanic contributed to establishing and enforcing the themes of the game. For V6, we're going back to a pool of Vitae. What's different from previous editions is that your Vitae is also your damage tracker. If your character takes damage, they lose Vitae. I will share my opinions on that later in this video, but let's say I am disappointed hunger is dropped as a mechanic. I think it deserved a spot in future editions, with perhaps a few tweaks here and there. Hunger, rest in peace. The other element I am anything but enthusiastic about from the playtest is quickening. Quickening is a new meta currency that players garner during play, and that they can use to increase their dice pools or even automatically succeed at checks. While I am all for giving players resources that they can use to change the odds in their favor, I feel like quickening fulfills a role that Vitae can cover while also being more rooted within the lore of the game. Blood surges, for which you spend Vitae, still exist, so why not allow characters to spend varying amounts of Vitae for extra dice or automatic successes? This will drive characters to also hunt more, tempting them to give into their beast. One detail I do like about quickening is that if you gain any while having 5 quickening, which is the maximum a player can have, you mark a box under your beast or nature tracker. This is a neat way to nudge players to spend their quickening, and is explained nicely in-universe as your blood being overstimulated. We'll talk more about beast and nature trackers in a little bit. And that's already my list of things I really dislike about the playtest rules. Honestly, diving into the playtest after having read some threads on Reddit had me fearing the worst. But I find most other things interesting, or at least interesting enough that I'm willing to see how they play, or think they can be good with a few more tweaks. Let's move on to those things. Just like V5 made some big changes to disciplines, V6 kicks things off by making its own modifications to these vampiric powers. Disciplines are sets of powers. The higher your rank in a discipline, the more access you have to powerful aspects of that discipline. Some powers within a discipline also mature, meaning that they gain new effects when your mastery of the discipline grows. For example, at 2 dots in animalism, you can acquire the feral claws power. This allows your character to grow fearsome claws that deal damage. Once you have 6 dots in animalism, feral claws matures and even inflicts harder to heal baneful damage. Longtime fans of Vampire might now frown their eyebrows and say, hang on, what is a protein power doing in animalism? Well, that is another change the V6 playtest is previewing. It seems like disciplines are getting merged where necessary, and in the playtest, we see that happening for protein becoming a part of animalism. While the nostalgia in me screams and rebels at the mere thought of that, I don't think merging disciplines is necessarily a bad thing. I, for one, never minded vicissitude in V5 becoming a subset of protein, and I don't think we need to have a lot of very specific disciplines if they thematically fit within a more general one. I am, however, curious to see how this will play out for other disciplines, and what the overall feedback to this change will look like. The one thing that I am most on the fence about is the updated humanity system. In previous iterations of Vampire, humanity was on a scale of 1 to 10. The more humanity you had, the more you were clinging on to what made you human, while on the lower end of the scale, you fully leaned into your monstrous side. Depending on which version of the rules you played, losing humanity worked differently mechanically, but it always boiled down to if you did certain heinous deeds, you were at risk of losing humanity or outright immediately lowered your rating. Regaining humanity was possible, but required a lot of in-character effort and XP expenditure. The V6 Alpha entirely reworks this system. The humanity scale consists of 7 dots, with Beast on one end and Nature on the other. Characters begin at the middle of this scale. Depending on which side of your character you feed more, your humanity will gradually shift more towards that, each side giving you bonuses and penalties. The Beast is the dark entity that lurks in every vampire, urging them to give into their hunger. Characters who shift their humanity more towards the Beast will start to look more monstrous, have a harder time associating with mortals, but also make their disciplines more powerful. Nature is the human side of a character, based on an archetype picked at character creation. For example, you could be a scientist who considers everything a puzzle, or a gallant who always wants to be in the spotlight. Leaning into your nature makes it easier for you to pass as a mortal, quells your beast, but also weakens your vampiric powers. Both sides also have their own tracker you fill whenever you suppress that side. If your beast or nature tracker is full, you respectively suffer a beast frenzy or an outburst as you are urged to give into that side of your character and unleash what you have been suppressing. After your frenzy or outburst, you slide one step closer on your humanity scale to that side. You can also shift one step closer to one side once per session when that side's tracker is empty and you spend time indulging in behavior of that side. For example, if you have the autocrat nature and your nature tracker is empty, you could spend a scene giving orders to your henchmen and then move your humanity scale one step closer to your nature. This change makes humanity no longer a downward spiral and gives players ways of playing a vampire who associates more strongly with their human side. I think the bonuses and penalties applied with each side are interesting, and I especially like that your discipline power rolls become more powerful if you lean towards your beast. That's a nice little bit of power temptation, and in this house, we love power temptations. However, I also always liked humanity as a downward spiral. Vampires who spend enough time in their unlife should constantly battle their beast, and loss of humanity should feel like something you cannot easily reacquire. In this new system, it reads like your character might shift around a lot, and shifting to one side might be too easy mechanically. In one session, you might experience a beast frenzy for denying your bestial side for too long, thus shifting one step closer towards beast. In the next session, you could end up keeping your nature tracker empty and then spending a scene giving into your nature to again move back towards the other side of the humanity scale. Of course, how likely that is to happen is heavily dictated by events in your chronicle, but I'm not convinced that a character shifting back and forth on this scale tells a more interesting story than that of a kindred permanently resisting the lure of the beast and having a hard time recovering humanity once it has been lost. Then again, I'm not opposed to a story that focuses on PCs who constantly move back and forth on this scale. I also think this system gives players mechanical tools to focus on one side if they want to. If you want your vampire to really succumb to their bestial nature, you can play them in a way that keeps their beast tracker empty and commit acts that will shift you towards the beast end of the scale faster. I also appreciate the note in the playtest that neither side is inherently evil or good. You can be at the far end of nature on your humanity tracker, but still be an awful person. All in all, I think this is one aspect I just have to see in action and see how well it works over a number of games. I mentioned earlier that Vitae is back and that it is now also your health pool. While I will miss hunger and think it should have stayed, I think using Vitae as HP is an interesting choice. My problem with Vitae as resources in previous editions has been that, next to powering disciplines and waking from your day sleep, there was not much else that forced you to spend it. As such, managing your Vitae felt too easy, and in many games I ran in older editions, characters rarely got to a point where they would run out of Vitae. Making Vitae a resource you can lose through external influences, said influences in this case being getting hit by enemies, makes it something a PC can more easily lose. I also think it's just very thematic. blood in this case literally becomes the life force of the character. Or should I say, the unlife force. The only thing I'm worried about is how this will work out in combat. PCs have the option to very quickly drain opponents for blood, but the question is if it will be worth it to spend your turn regaining Vitae if you might just lose it again over the next round. Still, it's an interesting change to the more classic blood pool, and it very slightly softens the blow caused by the loss of hunger. Once again, rest in peace, my beloved mechanic. Time for the final thing that makes me raise my eyebrows and stroke my beard in an expression of interest and curiosity. Drama and the diceless storyteller. The V6 Alpha is designed to only have players roll dice. Storytellers don't roll a single die. When an NPC is doing something to a PC, the player rolls to avoid or overcome it, instead of the storyteller rolling to see if the NPC succeeds. Furthermore, storytellers have a meta currency called drama. They start each session with an amount of drama equal to the number of players, and can gain more through failed rolls of the players or other events. Storytellers then spend drama to add complications to scenes, threaten a masquerade breach, or empower NPCs in a scene. Games in which the GM never rolls dice and that use a meta currency are nothing new. For example, any Powered by the Apocalypse game has the GM never roll a single die, and Modifius's 2d20 games such as Star Trek Adventures have the GM use a meta currency to increase the difficulty on rolls or add further threats to a scene. These concepts are by now well established in the wider TTRPG hobby, but are very big changes for a game like Vampire. Looking at online forums such as the VTM or White Wolf subreddit, this is one of the parts of the playtest that is generating a lot of discussion. As much as Vampire the Masquerade was a revolutionary game when its first edition released back in the 90s, a lot of its modern play culture is still rooted in traditional structures. One of those traditional aspects is the role of the storyteller as the final authority. Linking a metacurrency to such things as modifying a scene or requiring a certain number of metacurrency points to invoke a plot event such as a masquerade breach feels like the authority of the storyteller is being limited by the rules. On top of that, not rolling any dice as the storyteller removes an essential element of the classic TTRPG experience. Getting to take that fistful of dice and seeing what bad tidings their results will bring to the players. That being said, personally, I think that these changes are exciting, but the authors will have to take more time and care to explain how these actually enhance play and change the role of the storyteller in a vampire campaign. Not having to roll dice allows the storyteller to move more into the role of director and referee, focusing on describing scenes and interactions and adjudicating the roles of the players without having to interpret their own dice results. A metacurrency like drama, especially if being presented openly to the table so everyone knows how big the pool is, can actually add to the tension. If the players know they are walking into a tense debate with the local prince, and see the storyteller has 5 or more drama in their pool, they know that this scene can become extremely dangerous. The drama pool, thus, is something that should be more clearly presented as a tool to create tension and, well, drama, and not as something that limits the creative power and role of the storyteller. I think more examples of play utilizing the system could help, and maybe clarifying that not every change to a scene requires the storyteller to expend drama. The authors of V6 have their work cut out for them, though, as I feel a massive gameplay shift like this will receive a lot of pushback from a part of the community that is very much set in their ways. And there you have it. My takes on the V6 playtest of July 2026. Overall, I'm tentatively excited about this version of the game and curious to see future iterations of these rules. However, I will never forgive the authors for taking away hunger dice, and if I ever meet one of them in real life, I will whack my finger at them and shake my head in disappointment. That will teach them. What do you think of the V6 playtest? Have you already played some games using these rules, and if so, what's your take? Let me know in the comments below, and please, keep it civil. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, stay safe, take care, and bye-bye!